Have you been bit by the Python bug? No, I'm not talking about the snake or even the craze, but rather the programming language. We're on location virtually with Brock Tibbert, who's a lecturer at Boston University Questrom School of Business in the Information Systems Department, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Thanks for having me.
Brock, in layman's terms, what is data science?
It really boils down to an analysis of data, right? And I think where data science has really started to grow is the variety of problems that we're solving with tools that we've really had for decades now. What's really interesting, though, is that because we're collecting more and more data in industry and in our businesses, we're starting to see how we can apply these same methods to new and exciting problems.
And how does that play into the world of FinTech?
So FinTech is really interesting. There's a lot of opportunities with what's possible. So everything from credit risk modeling to fraud detection, right? Trying to identify bad actors through, transactions, especially as a lot of these transactions move digital. But we're also seeing some really interesting use cases through NLP. And if you think about financial disclosures and trying to look at sentiment of those statements, as well as trying to identify, say, perhaps how green is a company? Are they really behaving the way that they actually say they do in their report? So there's a lot of interesting applications there, even down to robo-advising, right? If you think about investment strategies and some smaller wins, you can get to nudge your investment portfolios to say, hey, maybe you can think about reallocating this way. And it's all automated. It's all just driven by machine learning and data science.
And you mentioned the acronym NLP. What does that stand for, please?
Natural language processing.
And again, in layman's terms, that means exactly?
Working with text data, more or less.
Okay. People are running around saying Python this, Python that. As you begin to peel back that onion, you will invariably run into the letter R. What exactly are those tools and how do they work within this world?
It's a great question. And it's one that when I'm in my classes, I often say it's not R or Python, it's both. I think they're both very valuable to data science and why data science is so popular today. Now, R is a statistical programming language. It was created by statisticians and in that time for statisticians. And it's really robust. And I think a lot of times too, we see, early work, academic work coming through R as a way to get the algorithms out from their papers, right? And then Python has really emerged and come more towards R in the way that we can analyze data. But what's really nice is that they both have strengths. Like I said, R is statistical programming language. Python is a little bit more embedded in the engineering community, but both allow for really easy access to analyze data, fit models, and really put that work into production.
So to further unpack this, they're software programs like anything in the Microsoft suite of products, but you're attacking the same set of data differently in terms of how you're analyzing it.
Exactly. We're writing commands. We're building script files that a computer can understand and run. And those scripts actually are analyzing the data and producing results.
As we get further into this, we go from data science to data-centric strategy. Help us to understand what that jump looks like.
Sure. I think, as we start to collect all this data, like I mentioned earlier, we're starting to really be able to model that, make decisions, see how behaviors can change we can use nudges to really make sure customers can move down the journey that we want. But really boiling that up, what we're seeing that we can do is really make sure that we're making decisions and understand the risk of those decisions. So we can use data, drive decisions, and understand the risk of those decisions that we're making or perhaps not making.
So further boiling that up, to borrow your phrase, what overall trends are you seeing these days?
Right now, I'm seeing a lot of work in terms of how do we get machine learning on devices. So if you think about large compute centers, server farms, from back in the day, we're really trying to take the machine learning models that we're fitting and really compress them down and be on device. So if you think of an iPhone or a smartphone, and we're really doing that to try to make sure that we're, from a privacy point of view, we're not storing all the data in the cloud, that is really centric to the user. The other thing, as I mentioned, I commented on NLP before. I'm really interested in this space. I think there's a lot of opportunity around text data, everything that we generate, whether it's social media posts, I noted financial disclosures. There's so much text data that we're generating that we can start to find opportunities to really kind of learn what's going on. So I comment on chatbots, I comment on sentiment analysis, or even you start to think about scanning medical discharge papers to make sure that someone, we don't have re-enlistment back in the hospital. There's a lot going on in that community.
Brock, what is a real life example of where data science can be applied?
Sure. I mean, we see this every day, whether we log into the streaming tool of choice and you see recommendations on things that we have not yet watched. If you think about sports analytics, there's been player evaluations, there's been predictions around what type of pitch might be thrown in baseball. We see this all the time, whether that's shown on the TV screen and we can see the location, right? There's all sorts of applications there.
Given how fast the train is going down the track, how does Questrom stay current with its curriculum, not only in your classes, but also within your department?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're certainly trying to bring forward all the new methods and techniques into our classes, whether it's classes that we have, classes we're building. We've been really pushing boot camps lately in terms of trying to get these shorter form classes out in front of the students to make sure that we're showing them what's really relevant in industry today, right? So it's not just what's done in practice or in theory, but actually what's applied. And we're bringing that forward through hands-on learning, real data sets, not just necessarily reading through the textbook, but also let's see it in action. And let's wrestle with the decisions of what we find in the models. Does it make sense? Should we apply it? And I go back to that risk. What is the risk of making this decision?
Brock, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Brock Tibbert, lecturer at Boston University Questrom School of Business in the Information Systems Department.
Big choices after college, right? Grad school, maybe? Soar from your undergraduate major to a great career in business. Biomedical engineer to healthcare analyst. Health science to clinical systems analyst. Mechanical engineer to solutions engineer. Before you know it, you can have a master's degree in management studies. 9 months and you're in business.
It's one thing to multitask, but how do you split your time equally amongst Paris, the United States, and a European institute? We're on location virtually with Primavera De Filippi, who is a permanent researcher at CNRS, the National Center for Research Sciences in Paris, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Thank you. Hi.
Primavera, what is the simplest definition of blockchain technology, please?
There is no simple definition of blockchain technology. I guess the simplest one will be a decentralized database. It is append only, so you can only add information and you cannot delete or edit the information once it has been recorded. In this case, there is no single operator. Everything is managed on a peer-to-peer basis by all the contributors, by all the people that are maintaining the network, which all verify every time someone is submitting a particular transaction to be added into this database. Everyone is verifying whether this transaction is valid, and only if everyone agrees that it's valid, it's going to be added into the blockchain.
So why is it so popular?
Well, it's mostly popular because of cryptocurrencies and more recently because of non-fungible tokens. I mean, it comes with those very interesting guarantees, meaning that it comes with like incorruptibility. So you can use it in order to verify that information is still correct, that it has not been tampered with. You can use it in order to create digital currency that is not managed by one central bank or one online operator. And it can be used like the most sophisticated types of blockchain. They also enable the execution of software code. So it's called the smart contracts. And so it becomes possible to actually execute code.
So you are a permanent researcher at the National Center for Scientific Research in Paris. You spend a lot of time focusing on artificial intelligence and the intersection of blockchain. What is your latest research paper focused on?
So right now I'm actually focusing mostly on like the question of regulation and legality of blockchain technologies, and the notion of alegality, which is not legal and it's not illegal, but it's illegal, meaning that it's beyond the reach of the law. And so there is a lot of discussion about whether or not those decentralized systems can be regulated, or whether they actually operate autonomously beyond the reach of the law.
So let me make sure I understand this. It's not legal or illegal, but it's illegal. which is outside of the boundaries of the law? Is that because the law hasn't caught up there yet? Or what is a better definition of illegal?
Yeah, so illegality is like this very specific concept in legal philosophy, and it's those are those acts, those activities that exist currently outside of the boundaries of the law. And there is three types of illegal things. There is the ones that simply the law was never meant to cover, like the act of thinking. This is not something that needs to be regulated or can be regulated. There are things that were intended to be covered by the law, but because of the way in which the law was formulated, it was not foreseeable, perhaps something, and so it's currently outside of the scope, but the law can easily catch up through some kind of legal reform. And then there is the third typology, which is the most interesting one, which were actually potentially intended to be covered by the law, but it's difficult for the law to reform itself in order to bring them within its own reach without actually modifying its own system, right? And so in the case of blockchain technology, there is all this question about smart contracts and what does it mean to enter into a contractual relationship with a smart contract, with an algorithmical entity. And if the law wanted to cover those transactions and put them into the scope of contract law, it will need to recognize the possibility, for instance, of entering with a contractual party, which is an algorithmical entity as opposed to a legal person or a physical person, right? And so it is possible, the law could do that, but that will require a radical change into its internal functioning.
We've talked in this interview about what blockchain is, non-fungible tokens, and a lot around the legality. If you had to summarize it, what are the 2 or 3 largest trends that you're seeing right now?
In blockchain technology, I think definitely like NFT, non-fungible token, is like a big trend. I will say there is like the DeFi, decentralized finance, which is also quite big. And then there is another one, but that is taking longer, I think, but there is a lot of interest building up, which is actually like the use of blockchain technology, not to bypass institution, but to reinforce the technological guarantees that those institutions can provide. And so it's actually adopting blockchain technology in order to increase trust and confidence in the way in which existing institutions operate. Right? And this is a lower trend, but I think it's like a very powerful one when it will actually click.
Of all of the legal research that you do today, what is the biggest single item that worries you the most about the future of this technology from a legal lens?
That's a very interesting question. There is a lot of potential worries. I think to me, it's about like, how do we make sure that policymakers are well informed when they regulate the technology, because there's actually so much to regulate, and like we have seen it like with the token sale and etc. There's a lot of regulation that needs to be done, but at the same time, replicating the same regulation to those new applications, the same that are applied to like traditional systems, is also impairing the development of those technology. And I think that the biggest challenge is, how do you regulate? But how do you regulate by actually accounting for the technological opportunity that the technology provides for regulatory compliance, right? And to me, like, there is a big field of research that needs to be fully explored. And it's today we do have a lot of laws and regulation which are due to the fact that we didn't have, at least until recently, a technology that provides its own accountability, right? And today I think there is something to explore about, like, is there some kind of ways, like, is there a functional equivalence between existing regulation and formalities which are justified by the lack of accountability, and technological tools that might actually bring that accountability and therefore reduce the regulatory burden that is today imposed on many institutions.
Primavera, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Primavera De Filippi, a permanent researcher at the National Center for Scientific Research, or CNRS, in Paris.
Are you a problem solver? Do you see the big picture and the small details? Want to turn big data into big decisions? Take AI to the boardroom. Translate rocket science into the science of business? Build your career at digital speed with a Master of Science in Business Analytics. Be ready for careers like analytics consultant, data science, analytics strategist, data translator, BI analyst, technical business analyst. 10 months, and you're in business analytics.
One of the more popular industries we've discovered is leveraging blockchain and fintech is real estate. Welcome to Regora CEO Brian Zitten to the Language of Business.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
What is your definition, Brian, of fintech?
Honestly, fintech in my mind is anything technology-wise that enables financial services, whether it's like the back-end banking stuff that no one ever knows about, or some of the more consumer-oriented things like a Robinhood or something like that. Basically, anything that's enabling financial services.
And what trends are you seeing amongst all things fintech?
I think it's definitely evolved over the last, 10, 15 years, in that it was initially more about, just tech enabling existing infrastructure. Now we're seeing like the 2.0 versions of a lot of that stuff where it's actually transforming the processes themselves. So whereas before it was like, how do we make existing banking processes better with technology? Now it's like, how do we redefine processes in general, whether it's what we're doing with appraisal or you mentioned blockchain, completely reinventing how certain things are done. So I think that's kind of the next evolution that fintech is approaching.
On your website, it says that Regora is trying to transform the real estate valuation or appraisal process through software. What does that mean to the average person?
Yeah, right now, if you're going to get a mortgage, you need to get an appraisal as part of that typically. And right now, that appraisal will take anywhere from 2 to maybe even 3 weeks to get done. It's really slow. And so what we do is we help deliver a more Uber-style approach to get the right appraiser at the right time, getting to your property. In the future, we envision even you as the borrower may be able to do, a mobile app driven inspection of your property yourself, which then gets sent to, a database to spit out a better, more accurate value. So kind of a transformation of the way that the properties are actually valued themselves.
What are you seeing with your software that someone isn't going to see on Zillow or someone that the bank hires is not going to be able to see in person?
Yeah. So, the thing about Zillow and the kind of existing automated valuation technology is that it doesn't actually verify any of the interior conditions of the property, which is really important, right? If you're going to if you're going to buy a home, whether it has granite countertops or not, impacts the value. So that's why we have a physical human who's going and validating that information. And it's why whether it's an appraiser, third party, or you yourself. And that's why the banking industry doesn't really trust the Zillow's estimate much. So we still need to improve the appraisal process.
What are the biggest challenges you foresee with Regora in the next 3 to 5 years?
Anytime that you are trying to innovate in an industry, you're obviously beholden to the regulatory components. So even if technology is far and beyond what is possible today, you need the rest of the industry from a business, compliance, and regulatory standpoint to catch up. So I imagine we will probably be, waiting on that sort of stuff to really take things to the next level.
Brian, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Brian Zitten, CEO of Regora.
Big choices after college, right? Grad school, maybe? Soar from your undergraduate major to a great career in business. Biomedical engineer to healthcare analyst. Health science to clinical systems analyst. Mechanical engineer to solutions engineer. Before you know it, you can have a master's degree in management studies. 9 months and you're in business.
It was only a matter of time in a relatively new industry like fintech that it would further splinter into something even newer. Welcome to the world of FemTech, F-E-M, focusing on women. We're on location virtually with Dr. Saeed Galomi, founder and CEO of I Care Better Incorporated, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Thank you, Greg, for having me.
What exactly is FemTech?
FemTech is the intersection of technology and where technology comes to help female health issues. For example, I start with our company. Our company is a marketplace and we offer expert care for chronic pelvic pain for women. So women with chronic pelvic pain can come to our platform and find good care for themselves. For another example, some women who have a baby and they don't have enough milk to breastfeed their baby, they can buy some milk from other women who are breastfeeding their babies. So this is another example of femtech companies. So femtech company is a space that technology comes to help solve female health issues.
Is all of femtech focused on fintech or vice versa, or is it just one percentage of it?
It's it could basically, whatever related to femtech, which is healthcare, women's healthcare, directly or indirectly impacts fintech. But it's a percentage of it that impacts fintech. Like overall, it's a much broader spectrum than only fintech being part of femtech.
And why did you start I Care Better 4 years ago?
Yes, sure. So the story starts way before 4 years ago when I was in medical school, and I saw there's a huge gap in access to good care for people with complex chronic conditions. And the situation was much worse when that person was a woman and the chronic conditions was mostly affecting women. Like, for example, in one of my rotations, I saw a woman admitted with rectal bleeding that happened every month. And she used to come back to hospital every month for the last couple of years. And no one knew what's wrong with her until in that admission, we figured she has endometriosis. And we sent her out to a gynecologist, but then she kept coming back.
Sure.
Like we diagnosed her, but we still didn't know what the treatment would be. So we decided to launch a company to fill the gap of access to good care for people with complex conditions with a focus on women's health. That's why we launched I Care Better.
Given how new femtech is, even though it doesn't necessarily directly relate 100% to fintech, what are the investor expectations like in this space?
Sure. So when you talk to investors who is experienced enough in femtech, they know the exit and achieving good goals and high return investments is typically longer than your typical startups. Like, for example, on average in femtech space, it takes around 10 years for a company to have a good exit. And the average exit is like $408 million.
Sure.
People who are experienced in this space and who have done their homework, they come with realistic expectations of 10 years, more or less, and this number. But there have been some investors who aren't necessarily experienced, but they come and they want quick return investment, or they want something in 3 or 5 years, which is typically what investors would want from other segments. And that's a bit surprising to them to see it's a longer period, but higher return for them.
You mentioned that the average valuation for companies in this space is $408 million. Given that I Care Better is 4 years in, are you equal to, less than, or greater than that number so far?
That's a great question. I wish we were $408 million. That $408 million is the number when companies get to exit on average 10 years. So we have 6 more years to hit that number. I hope in 6 years we can overperform that number. But now we are definitely less than that.
So in the first 4 years and in the next 6, what specific trends in femtech or fintech do you think are going to affect your day-to-day operations or your long-term strategy?
Absolutely. There has been a higher understanding and awareness about femtech in general and about women's health issues specifically. We thought as a woman has a disease, that's a general problem. We can solve it with our current PCP and referral system. But now we are understanding, no, some diseases are more specific and more complex. And this understanding is going into corporations, insurance companies, which has made them to invest more in offering more specific and tailored solutions to their female employees or to the partner of their male employees, right? So this is the situation. Moving forward, we are seeing more companies understanding this space and investing in this space. And we are going to definitely take advantage of that in our long-term strategy by partnering with corporations and insurance companies to help us deliver our services and our experts to their patients, to their employees, to their members, basically.
Saeed, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for this great discussion.
Dr. Saeed Gholami, founder and CEO of I Care Better Incorporated.
Support for the Language of Business is from Boston University Questrom School of Business. We're also available as a podcast on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for watching.